Okay. So, who was I talking to yesterday told me that John LaForge was like the expert that knew everything having to do with nukes. Like, and so I'm delighted to introduce him and Marion Kutker, who is going to go first. And I guess you're from Germany. Are the two of you are partners, aren't you?
Actually married even.
You're
Yes.
married, okay. So you probably know everything about nukes as well. So I'm just gonna let them take it from here. They've got some slides to show at some point, and I'm sure this will be a very engaging and informative presentation. So thanks again for everybody who's here. And I'm gonna unpin myself. Let's see.
Thanks, Becky.
Oh, there you go. Thanks, Alan.
Okay, I start. Thanks everybody for coming. And yeah, a short introduction. I'm working since nearly 30 years now to oust US nuclear weapons in Germany, in Büchel. And right now I'm a peace referent against nuclear weapons for the German section of the Fellowship of Reconciliation here in Germany, and also one of the campaign's spokesperson from our German-wide campaign. Yeah, we have a German-wide campaign since now, 30 years too. And our network, or our parent network called Abolish Nuclear Weapons, starts with us, which I find very important since, we can't demand things from other people when we don't dare to look what we have in our backyard. Our campaign network contains of 75 non-governmental groups and organizations from the German peace movement. For example, IPPNW, which is something like PSR Germany, Pax Christi, German War Resisters, plenty of groups. And also we have the US watchdog group Nukewatch as part of our network. Before I start to tell you a little bit about the history of how it started with our resistance against the weapons, I want to share a picture with you. I think you can see it right now. Can you see it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, great. It's from the book Medal of Dishonor, and more than 20 years ago I found this one. And since this is a Veterans for Peace, I just want to remember that more than 250,000 US veterans were actually victimized by open air nuclear testing in between 1945 and 1963. So that's something I just wanted you to know. So now wait, I'm going to my next picture. Why doesn't it work? Yeah, okay. So this is one picture of our group. We meet often, but at least now with, but since years we are doing it already. We talk once a week by an hour on telephone. We have different working groups, and yes, we exist since 30 years. And so we started when we realized that after the Cold War, we were still having 20 US nuclear weapons in Germany, even though our government was hiding it. And this was or is under nuclear sharing in NATO. And it's the same situation we're having in Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, Turkey, Great Britain, now again, and Germany. So altogether, we had about 180 nuclear weapons, and they are about 10 times the explosive power of the Hiroshima bomb. And right now, there are about 100 left. That time when we started, we thought, oh, that's not a big deal. Only 20 left from the Cold War. In the 80s, we had huge resistance in Germany, and made it possible that actually more than 5,000 nuclear weapons got withdrawn from our soil. Here you can see a little bit, this is already the new one, how it's going to look like, the B-6112, but that's how the bombs look like. Here they are under a tornado. Nuclear sharing actually means these bombs are on a German army base deployed, and they are in the hands of US soldiers, military, and in case there's an order by the US president, they're gonna be handed over to the German planes and the German pilots, and they will have to fly and drop them. That's nuclear sharing policy. And also they're doing exercises each year together in NATO, how to make nuclear war. So this was in 1997, our first civil disobedience go in action, where we climbed over the fence. And basically, we believed that when something is against international law is above German law, our court would have to look into it, and we wanted to enforce this law by doing these kinds of actions, which we already did 1997 on, again and again, and we got to the Constitutional Court, and already then the Constitutional Court decided that this issue is not important enough to actually rule on it. They just rejected to even have a look at it. So, but we went on over the years. In 2010, we started our first Easter rally. Every year on Easter Monday, we are having, this is on the countryside, a big rally going from the village Büchel to the main gate of the base. And besides doing actions and vigils, and we also did lobby work. For example, here, this is in the Chancellor office. We did parliamentarian breakfast. This is the office of for foreign relations. And we also did we collected signatures, which we handed over to our government, because we demanded that these weapons have to be withdrawn, and then later also that the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons have to be signed by our government, which they haven't. And also what happened later but I get to this, what happened later. So this year are the mayors for peace in Germany. Right now we are having 837 mayors for peace. So worldwide we are on place 3. Number 1 is Japan, as you can imagine, but Iran is the country 2nd. So that was very surprising for us. There are more than, I don't know what, I think 7,000 mayors for peace worldwide now, cities. So that campaign went really successful. And also the mayors for peace in Germany, they actually demand from our government to sign the TPNW. So during that time, that was our first campaign, actually. We demanded that, or the goal was Germany without nuclear weapons by 2009. And actually we were successful, because in a way we were successful. The chief of the Liberal Party that time, they made it to a condition with the Conservative Party, with Merkel, that our government should negotiate inside NATO that these bombs should be withdrawn, that we don't want to have them. And also in March 2010, there was a cross-party decision where all parties demanded that. And yeah, from 2010 on, there was an NPT and so on. There was these discussions going on, and we were actually waiting for the results on it. So in 2011, you might remember, Fukushima happened. We still had no decision. So for a while, we did a short second campaign. And with Fukushima, we called it two sides of the same medal, because we wanted to show that civil use and military use is connected. We wouldn't have nuclear energy if there would have not been the need for plutonium for the nuclear bombs. I mean, most people don't know that fuel rods, when they are being used in nuclear reactors and civil nuclear reactors, they contain at the end a little bit plutonium, so they go to the reprocessing plant, and that's where it's being extracted for the bomb, actually. So after that, in 2012, there was a NATO summit in Chicago, and actually NATO decided, including the German leaders, not to withdraw these nuclear bombs, but instead to modernize the Cold War old B-61 bombs in Büchel and also the other European countries. Yeah. And let me see, that means for us that the 400 nuclear weapons and 400 B-61-12, they're being produced in actually in facilities in the United States. Y-12 Tennessee is very important for that, and also the Kansas City plant. So when these are finally fully, each one will cost 25 million, each one of the bomb. It's more than gold, actually. And with this comes only for Germany 35 F-35 joint stealth fighter, because the US only gives permission for these planes to carry them. This is a nuclear carrying plane. Wait. So we were really frustrated about this decision, as you can imagine, which meant that we developed a third campaign. The third campaign, called Büchel is Everywhere, Nuclear Weapon Free Now. And the goal was 20 weeks for 20 bombs. And we wanted to involve churches in our protest and also civil disobedience. A lot of people felt like they want to do blockades of the gates and yeah, also more go in actions to really challenge the courts actually to finally decide about these things. And we wanted also the US abolitionists to get involved. Yeah, let me see. That's one. So we started these 20 weeks of action meant that time I moved in the region and had these groups, these peace groups, to do the actions throughout these 20 weeks. We had always a 6 weeks camp in between, from where people prepared their actions, from where people had informal meetings. Here's a blockade of a gate of the Pacific group, for example, who wanted to remember the survivors of the people in the Marshall Islands. We had famous musician coming and playing, so that led to also mayors in the region joining our protest. In the nearby town Cochem, For anybody of you who doesn't know where Büchel is in central Germany, close to Koblenz, where there's a Rhine and Mosel. It's actually very touristic, where a lot of US citizens make vacation. So we went to the towns and let them know what's going on, not much far away in the volcanic Eifel region at the base. This year is a performance we had on the church day. We had by now 5 bishops. Every year another religious leader comes to Büchel and is praying and is calling to get rid of these weapons. And in 2019, actually before Corona, we had the biggest group. We had more than 1,000 people coming there. So that was also very successful, because this region is also a very religious region, so it has a big impact on the people who live there. And we had this ballet with the 20 nuclear bombs. These are inflatable ones, which we just produced for it. 2020, we had no protest, but we had in 2021 a human chain from the village of Büchel to the main gate, which is about 3.5 kilometers. And even though trains were not running at that weekend, we were successful in making this chain. Yeah, this is, now we know all that the TPNW is enforced. 50 countries signed it. So this is my hometown, Hamburg, where I'm from, where at the, this January 22nd, where we had a big vigil and protest. So I like to hand over here to John LaForge, and I left him actually all the actions we had in Büchel on civil disobedience and blockades, and also with the International Week we were both organizing. So thank you for listening so far.
Thanks, Marion. And thank you all for coming to the workshop. A little bit of background about me. I'm sitting in the Nukewatch office, which is hidden in rural Wisconsin, a place called Luck. It used to be in Madison, Wisconsin, where we got started, and we were made famous by the publication of our book, Nuclear Heartland, which was the first time that the locations of US land-based missiles were made available to the US public. Since that time, that was 1988, Nukewatch has continued to focus on nuclear power and weapons, the downside of the economics and the environmental impact of nuclearism in general. We joined the German campaign to oust the US nuclear weapons from Germany about 2013, started helping the organization of protests at the Büchel Air Base there south of Cologne. The US nuclear weapons are known as B-61s. I'm trying to share a picture of that, of the weapon here. The weapons
Can't be seen.
have been around for a very long time. B-61s have gone through 12 modifications. The B-61s that are currently in Germany are the B-61-3s and the B-61-4s. They are between 50 kilotons of explosive power and up to 170 kilotons. That is, they're between 3 and 11 times the explosive force of the Hiroshima bomb. So I'd like to dispel some of the terrible reporting that's happened since recently. Russia claims, and it's been rather well verified, to have moved nuclear weapons into neighboring Belarus. And when this happened this past winter, the Associated Press and most of the US press reported that these were so-called tactical nuclear weapons, not the city busters that are known to be on bombers and submarines and land-based missiles. But this is a total misunderstanding or disinformation from the news media, because as we point out, these weapons, even the small so-called low-yield tactical nuclear weapons, are up to 11 times the force of the Hiroshima bomb. Even the smallest ones now deployed in Europe at these 6 air bases are 3 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb, which killed 140,000 people. So they're all city busters. Don't be fooled by the poor reporting going on from the copycat move by Russia to put nuclear weapons in Belarus. Again, I'm trying to share some photos here, but here we go. Can you see these, anyone?
No.
No. Marion mentioned that these weapons, now the B-61-12, which is planned to replace the B-61-3s and 4s that are now deployed across Europe, are under production. The U.S. is building between 400 and 480 of these brand new 700-pound gravity bombs. These are not missiles. Sometimes they're reported as missiles. Again, that's just bad or laziness by Associated Press and others. These are gravity bombs simply dropped from jet fighter bombers. The change with the new Model 12 is that it's had fins added to the back end, which gives it more maneuverability, reportedly increasing its accuracy and making it more likely to be used in the event of an order from or a hostile situation in Europe. Of course, the exercises called Steadfast Noon and others that rehearse the planned use of these weapons are targeted at Russia. All these exercises are plans and preparations and rehearsals to attack Russia with these thermonuclear bombs. And that's why, in part, the Europeans, the Germans, the Dutch, the Italians want these weapons finally removed and returned to the U.S. permanently. The cost of replacing these, instead of removing them and leaving them dismantled in the United States, is between 10 and 12 billion dollars to make these 400 bombs. That makes them the most expensive nuclear weapons ever made by the United States. As Marion pointed out earlier, if they were solid gold, they would cost less than is $25 million a piece. They are being made all over the United States. It's a jobs program, as you can imagine. It's a fact of the United States military industrial university complex that everybody's got a foot in this fight, and that places all over the United States, including Kansas City, Lawrence, Livermore, California, Los Alamos, New Mexico, the Albuquerque National Nuclear Security Administration, the Pantex plant in Texas, Sandia National Laboratories in New Mexico, Savannah River site in South Carolina, and the Oak Ridge site in Tennessee are all involved in the development and production of these new bombs. We've taken a lot of different sorts of actions at the base. Again, I'll see if I can bring these pictures up. And moved from simple blockades, and vigils to more consequential go-in actions, as they're referred to in Germany, where we have clipped the fence and gone in to inspect to see if what we suspect is actually correct, that these weapons are deployed there, and then after having confirmed that quite positively, to then interfere with the threatened use of these things in our crime prevention efforts to halt the ongoing criminal conspiracy to commit massacres using these bombs. We've taken this argument about crime prevention, as Marion pointed out, all the way through the German court system, which involves a local courts initially, and then a regional court, and then ultimately the Constitutional Court, which is the German equivalent of the US Supreme Court, where we have been convicted, and the convictions have all uniformly been upheld by the Constitutional Court, although the Constitutional Court hasn't bothered to offer us an opinion as to whether they find the deployment of these weapons to be lawful or not. They have simply allowed the lower court convictions of us for trespass and damage to the fence to stand without issuing an opinion. So for that reason.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
John, I'm sorry to interrupt you in the middle of a point, but
No problem.
can you, we want to give you a minute to figure out your screen sharing so that we can see those visuals you've been trying to share.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, let me see. I had them in a easy to find folder for a time.
You see the green arrow on the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I see it. Now you can click on the picture. Oh, no, it's gone again.
I'm sorry, folks.
Is it a slideshow or just one shot at a time you're showing?
Yeah, it's a several. It's 28 slides. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Yeah.
But now you see all 28?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and when you click on the first one.
Oh, no.
No, yeah, there, click there. No, not there. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's working?
Yeah.
Yeah, that should work.
All right.
Let's see, is there a way to do a full screen view of that? Maybe this arrow up at the top. That diagonal two-headed arrow would that make the screen bigger?
I think the square at the upper right corner, there's a square to the right of the X.
Yeah, not the X, but the
Right.
square.
Yes.
Square, yeah, try that.
There?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you.
excellent.
All right. Well, we're back underway. This is a storage of the B-61s, the older ones that I believe are Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. There's an aerial photograph of the bunkers where the weapons are kept at the ready for loading into the Tornado fighter jet bombers. This is the bunkers at the Büchel Air Base in Germany, where we've done the go-in actions either to occupy the runway or to occupy the bunkers themselves. This is just a dinner at one of the international peace camps. We've held 6 or 5 of them over the last few years, beginning in 2017, where Nukewatch and the German organizers coordinated a group of 10 US citizens who each time came over for the week-long or 10-day-long peace camp attached to the base. It's right outside the base gates. There's obviously the camp kitchen. And obviously our campaigns are actively involved in nonviolence training, and a lot of planning and preparation goes into these demonstrations beforehand. Before we blockade the road, this is a student group that came in and got involved with blockades. You can see the traffic backed up a little ways here. This group of 50 people came from a long ways off in a big bus and blockaded the main gate to the Büchel base. Our friend Dennis Duval here, formerly of Prescott, Arizona, now 81 years old. He just finished a 60-day jail sentence in Germany for a couple of go-in actions in 2018. He lives in Germany now. Again, as I was saying earlier, these so-called tactical nuclear weapons aren't in any way low-yield weapons. In the 5 or 6 international peace camps we had, the largest go-in was July 15th of 2018, where 18 people managed to get into the base, and one group actually got onto a bunker. The protest action this year took place at the Vogel Air Base in the Netherlands, where another 15 to 20 U.S. nuclear weapons are stored and kept at the ready. Again, a delegation of 10 or 11 U.S. citizens joined the blockades there. This is jumping back again to 2018 with Susan Crane in the background and yours truly in the front doing a action on August 6th, Hiroshima Day 2018. And this is the back of one of these weapons bunkers where they're stored and kept ready to load onto the planes. This is a picture I took before we climbed on top and spent a couple hours there before we were taken into custody. And for that action, Susan Crane and I have been through the court system. This past winter, I did a quick 7 weeks in the German prison system for getting into the base that day. Again, these inflatables are quite dramatic. This was the church day a couple years ago when interfaith organizations come and demand the ouster of the bombs. This is one of the U.S. delegations with our Dutch friends. Again, our blockades take many forms. This year at the Vogel Air Base outside of Amsterdam, people managed to, including U.S. citizens, to get on the runway, making quite a stir and breaking into the Dutch television news for 3 nights in a row. So this was quite a good educational effort this past August, earlier in August. This was part of the large go-in action of 18 people where our friends Steffi and Susan and Fritz got directly on top of one of the bunkers. Here's Marion's, Steffi, and our friend Marguerite are in trial in Kokum for a trespass and going in. Obviously, the gates are occupied with musicians occasionally too, where we make a pretty good, joyful sound during our demonstrations. Here's my attorney, Anna Büchel, and myself at trial during the COVID epidemic. This past August 6th in the Vogel Air Base, the abolitionists put together these giant oversized books. Here one named for the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and brought them into the base to bring attention to the criminal deployment of these nuclear weapons, which stand in violation of binding treaty law. We've had a different banner made each year that we conducted an international peace camp. This is the main gate at Büchel again. And I did want to point out that our legal argument is based in large part on the amazing work of Professor Francis Boyle, who's quoted here in a banner quite a long time ago. He's the author of The Criminality of Nuclear Deterrence, among many other books. And he helps us make the case that German constitutional law elevates treaties to the status of the highest law in the land, just as the US Constitution at Article 6 does. So then if you take these treaties and look at them in conjunction with the known and unavoidable effects of nuclear weapons, it's quite easy to argue and to show to a jury that the use of nuclear weapons violate the Hague regulations, which forbid the use of poison or poison weapons. They violate the Geneva Conventions, which forbid the attacks on civilians or civilian objects. And the Nuremberg Charter Principle and Judgment in particular, which was imposed on Germany by the occupiers after the Second World War, forbids the planning and preparation of a war that would violate the other treaties. So merely having nuclear weapons ready to use is this planning and preparation of wars in violation of the Hague Treaties and the Geneva Conventions. So this is the argument we've taken to the nth degree in the German courts, so far unsuccessfully, but now there are 5 and soon 6 defendants from Germany who have not settled for this refusal by the Constitutional Court and have appealed to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, France, arguing that, for example, in my own case, since the court refused to hear Professor Boyle, who I'd offered as an expert witness, refused to hear his testimony, we're arguing to the European Court that our trials were unfair, that the bias against us is shown by their refusal to listen to expert witness testimony. And therefore, the European Court should find that the trial was conducted in error, or the conviction was found in error, and the court should either send the issue back for a retrial in Germany, or perhaps the court could even find in its own right that the transfer of US nuclear weapons to Germany, to Holland, to Italy, Belgium, and Turkey violates Articles 1 and 2 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The Non-Proliferation Treaty forbids the transfer of weapons to a non-nuclear state and forbids non-nuclear states from receiving the transfer of nuclear weapons from the nuclear weapon state. So the law is very clear. The law is on our side. We keep making the case. And this is the courtroom or the courthouse in Kokum. It's actually Marion and myself with our friend in the middle. We haven't won many of these cases, which humorously brings to mind that I think it was Einstein's definition of insanity. If you keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting it and getting the same result, then you might be insane. But in fact, the string of convictions that we've run up against over the last 30 years does have one shining light in it. In a case in Minneapolis, a jury did find us not guilty based on this very same argument. We were protesting the deployment and threatened use of depleted uranium weapons in Minneapolis State Court, where the judge was very familiar with international law, and he understood the Hague regulations, the Geneva Conventions, and our right to inspect the threatened use of depleted uranium. So that single victory in all these many cases over the years might give us an out from Einstein's condemnation. Of my last slide here is a picture of the 18 of us who were detained for a time in July of 2018. Most all of the people here have been charged with trespass, and we're making the case as well as we can that the deployment of these weapons is the real criminal act, not the inspection or the interference with the threatened use of these things. Well, we do have 90 minutes and plenty of time for some Q&A if people have some questions to, if we've raised some questions among the listeners, then we'd be happy to take some questions.
And you would prefer the questions to be put in the chat, is that right? And you can stop sharing your screen, I guess.
Okay.
Ann Wright has her hand up.
Oh, we can take hands up too if you're comfortable controlling the stack. That's fine. Hi, Ann.
Hey, Marion and John, great to see you all, and thanks for all your continuing efforts in Europe and every place else. I was with you all once in Büchel and would certainly encourage
right.
everyone to come. It's a beautiful campsite and the actions are so well planned and it's really great. My question is on the issue of getting arrested and then going to court. I know, John, you have been, I think Susan has, Brian. What is the update on how many of you all are still facing court action and such things? Thank you.
Shall I answer? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, we are in the situation that all 19 people who went to the Constitutional Court were dismissed by the Constitutional Court. And there's one civilian person as well. And 6 of them decided to go to the European Court on Human Rights because we had our rights dismissed to defend ourselves because our international law experts, they were not allowed to witness on our behalf. So yeah, and there's just one single person left who might or the decision is going to be probably in the next 1-2 months. So then she also is gonna go to the Constitutional Court as well. And from the campaign now, we decided to have an action in September on the International Day on Nuclear Weapons in front of the Constitutional Court to demand actually that they look in our cases and that they don't dismiss it all the time or not refuse looking into it. And that means on September 22nd, that's when we have our protest there with Justitia, Justitia which is sleeping. We want to wake her up. And we're having, also the globe there and so on. We have a performance and we go from there by bike to Strasbourg, which is just about 100 kilometers south in France. And in France on Monday, we are having another protest calling at the European Court for actually also to look into the issue and hold up international law, which is that's what they are there for. Maybe you'd like to add something, John?
And I know that Susan Crane of California, who's been in every single one of these U.S. delegations since 2017, will be probably sent to prison camp in Germany as well. She's in the process of finishing up an appeal process and has been ordered to pay a fine.
Okay, ready for the next question?
Sure.
Jim Ryan would go ahead.
Yes, thank you for these presentations. It's very informative. Really appreciate what you're doing over there. My question is, what is the opinion of the European population about trading all these nuclear weapons, taking them out of NATO and Europe, in exchange for peace in Ukraine and withdrawal of Russian troops.
It's funny there. So I'll just say quickly, I'll let Marion answer about the general question, but in particular, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, former president of Costa Rica, proposed exactly that about a year ago, suggesting that if NATO and the US withdrew these nuclear weapons, it would be a goodwill gesture to Russia, a trust building demonstration that would help de-escalate the situation and might lead to some negotiations. That was flatly ignored by the US and NATO. But Marion, maybe you want to speak to the public opinion question.
Yeah. We used to have polls actually, and it showed that between 80 and 90% of the German population wants this nuclear sharing to stop and wants these weapons to be out. It has changed a little bit since the war in Ukraine. Some people believe now we might need nuclear weapons to defend ourselves. But the peace movement actually knows exactly, or that's what Daniel Ellsberg was teaching us also, that if these nuclear weapons would be used against Russia, we all would be affected by the fallout. So there is no win situation in using nuclear weapons. That's important. And then the other aspect is also, and that's what we like to push, and John could speak more about, is that with this nuclear sharing policy we are having, which is illegal, but it's not being accepted by the countries being involved that this is illegal. This is just a door to make it possible that any non-nuclear weapon country could ask for nuclear weapons, nuclear sharing from a nuclear power state they like or they cooperate with. And so this actually undermines everything we are having.
Yeah, Jim, your point is very good. These massive military exercises that take place 12 times a year. There's several that are well known, like Steadfast Noon, but there's dozens of others that take place. They're all rehearsals for attacking Russia, and they go along with this vast expansion of NATO memberships that's taken place since 1991. And so obviously there was plenty of provocation that moved Russia into this paranoid position of having to send its troops into Ukraine. And the great mythology, the great cover story that it was unprovoked is about as believable as the magic bullet theory.
Okay, I've collected a few questions that have come in. So I'm going to ask one of the chat questions before we go to Alice Slater.
Okay.
And this one is, where can we order inflatable bombs? They're thinking they could use those in their actions in the USA. Where do we find those?
It's impossible, actually. There was an activist, he put a lot of efforts into it, and then partly ordered it from China, partly did the construction by himself, and now he is seriously sick, so he can't do it anymore. So they are unique. We only had 20. And it's even in Germany, it's difficult. Some groups, they are asking for Hiroshima Day and so on. Oh, where can I borrow one? Yeah.
I don't know who you would talk to, but I know there's people in New York City that have created maybe out of something like Mylar, a really lightweight wrapper. They create a shape and then they fill it with helium balloons so they can float it.
Those were actually created by artists from Germany.
Oh.
Well, we have one here at the office, and it was with the golden rule over the weekend. So we have one floating around, and I carry it with me these days. So maybe I can loan that one out.
I loved the big book too. That was fantastic. Okay, let's go to Alice Slater.
I just want to say that we used to ship an inflatable back and forth between New York and Europe. Xanthi Hall in Germany was responsible at her end, and I saw her in some of your photos. And Jürgen Scheffrin was helping us make some of them, and IPP. We had Europeans that were doing it, but I'm sure we can figure it out. I really want to go on follow up on what you were going to say, John. I was going to talk about Oscar Arias. Not only did he say to get our nukes out, but he said make it a bargain with Putin, who just said he's putting nuclear weapons in Belarus. I mean, they have never done that before.
Right.
Putin is putting that out as more of a challenge and saying, you know, if you're not going to get your nukes out of NATO, I'm going to put them in Belarus. And I'm wondering, is that being discussed in Europe as a trade-off? I don't hear it. I mean, our media is so brainwashed by the military industrial complex that's making a killing off killing. We can't get the truth out of anybody, but I don't know if that's part of your speaking, that if we're going to get the nukes out of NATO, we should make that as an offer to Putin to get his out of Belarus, and keep reminding people that he didn't just put them in willy-nilly, that we already had them in five countries. Not only that, I don't know if you all know the Cuban Missile Crisis, like Kennedy and Khrushchev made a secret deal to get the missiles out of Cuba, and Khrushchev told Kennedy he put them there because we had put missiles in Turkey.
Right.
None of this was reported. And Kennedy said to Khrushchev, if you get your missiles out, I'll take mine out of Turkey. But you can't say it because the Congress won't let me do it. And they made a secret deal, and Khrushchev got out of Cuba, we got out of Turkey, and they're back. We have missiles, nuclear missiles on Russia's border in Turkey. So I don't know if I have a question or like just a plea, like how do we bust through in terms of making that a point that people should know, that we're in more nuclear danger now with Putin going to Belarus, and he's doing it because of how we've ignored our legal obligation all these years. Thanks.
Yeah, Alice, your point is very good. It's almost a perfect parallel, actually. The trade-off could be made. Exchanging withdrawals would be a perfect example of de-escalation, and that it would be very easy to accomplish. Instead, this giant jobs program initiated by Obama and Biden to rebuild the entire nuclear weapons complex includes this modernized B-61. So it's this jobs program against common sense. And you're right that the media is not reporting it. Did you want to add to something, Marian?
Yeah. I mean, what I find interesting is now that the lawyers committee on nuclear policy, like John Burrow, at the PrepCom in Vienna, just last month, they handed in a paper, and it's about, they want for the next NPT that there's going to be a discussion about nuclear sharing, because it's not just Russia or Belarus and Germany or Europe. It's also that Japan wants to have nuclear sharing with the US, and also South Korea. There's discussions about that, and it has to be, the danger of it. It's like how fast
we just offered to put more nuclear weapons right on South Korea's border to be available to Japan. I mean, we're already doing that. I mean,
right. And for the first time too, at the PrepCom, ICANN, it was a woman from ICANN Germany. She spoke in the name of ICANN, that they spoke also out and condemned nuclear sharing for the first time, and all the countries which are involved. So it seems like now it's the issue is being heard again, and people are being aware again how important it is to really stick to it.
I just wanted to insert, because when you're talking about news media and journalism, I'm sure there's, quite the lockdown on the major media. But in terms of individual journalists, I'm wondering if there's a way that you might, or one of the actions people could take is to present workshops that are specifically geared for journalists, and to inform them, just to educate them about the technical aspects. Like you were talking about earlier, they tend to get terms, they tend to get the facts wrong. So I wonder if there's a way you could do that.
That's a very good idea.
Mm-hmm.
We need the background.
Yeah.
Okay, I see Art Mulholland on the queue. Go ahead, Art.
Did we lose Art?
What, did we lose him? I thought I was spotlighting, but we ended up spotlighting Jerry instead.
Oh, so there, is that better?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so recently I met a couple guys from Germany, and I was rather shocked and dismayed when I asked them the question about nuclear weapons in Germany and what they thought about that. And they looked like it was a new topic to them. And they said, well, sounds like a good idea. It keeps us safe from Putin. And I said, well, do you actually have any awareness? Do you ever think about nuclear weapons? They said, not really. So I'm wondering, it sounds like Germany, based on those two guys, which isn't much of a sample, obviously, is sort of like Americans. We hardly think about them either. And with all your actions, and knowing about what's been going on over the years, and knowing what Marion said about 90% of people are opposed to nuclear weapons, are they really covered? Are these actions and the presence of nuclear weapons and these constant nuclear exercises covered in German newspapers?
Yeah,
just like here.
it's basically it hasn't been covered in the past because it was that was arrangement between Germany and the US government, that there's not to talk about it. And when you don't admit it, and how do you know? That's what we often were asked when we did protests there. Everybody who worked at the base knew there are nuclear weapons. So then for some years when we had actions, it was only reported in the state of Rheinland-Pfalz and the region, the villages where we were doing the action. But with the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons and also with the increasement of our protest with the Mayors for Peace, we got involved and informed about it. So
I don't think I closed the door right.
So it got, it got better known, let's say it this way, but still it happens a lot that people are surprised when they hear about it. That's right.
I'm going to read another question from the chat. This comes from New Hampshire, I believe, Will Thomas. I noticed that most of the folks on this Zoom are seniors, as I am. What efforts are being taken to recruit young folks to the nuclear ban effort, and how best to engage such young people?
Oh, that's a good question. Our colleagues at the Oak Ridge Environmental Peace Alliance out in Tennessee, they're really active on this question, and they have a good model, and they're successful in bringing in a lot of young people. So maybe we should take a lesson from Arepa out in Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Okay,
And for Germany, I can say we always had big youth delegations to the NPT conferences. We did bring them to New York to educate them, did some funding for it. We did bring them to the conference on the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. A lot of young people were there. Even this year, when the actions in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands was organized together with Extinction Rebellion, but then the bad weather, a lot of younger people didn't come finally, because we had planned that part of the group is gonna be on a campsite. So it's actually, we tried a lot. Also ICANN and IPPNW, they had in Nurvenich. Right now, the base in Germany, the nuclear weapons base, is being spent $1 billion to make it ready, prepare it for the new bombs. Like there's gonna be a new runway, there are gonna be new shelves for the new bombs and so on. So it's being, the pilots and the planes are being moved to another base, to Nurvenich, which is close to Cologne. And nearby is actually a lot of open pit mines, coal mines, where young people from Fridays for Future are having their resistance camps. And we always try to not only be there, be with them, learn from their struggles. They try to teach them what we are doing and try to make it possible that we fight together, because nuclear weapons and also the military planes is also a climate issue. I mean, the whole military exposure or CO2 is not included in the climate question, but somehow it's like when we were young, you know, the young people want to do mostly their stuff by themselves, and yeah, so it's hard. It's really hard to get younger people involved. And it's also, I guess, it's a very frustrating topic as well. And it's very scary, as if the climate issue is not already scaring enough for them.
Yeah. Well, it might be a good topic for a VFP No Nukes meeting, eh, Jerry? You need to unmute yourself, sorry.
Great. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's constant talk for the peace movement overall, and certainly for the anti-nuclear movement. And, you know, one of the best ideas we have, and Marion talked about how they're putting that into practice in Germany, is reaching out to the young activists who are involved, very much involved with the climate crisis and climate justice movement, and kind of linking up as we can to the two existential crises that are facing human civilization today. You know, when some of them catch fire on an anti-nuclear issue, it's going to make a big difference. So we have to keep making all the efforts we can. I just wanted to thank Marion and John for being here and sharing their years of dedication and wonderful knowledge that we all need to know, and for your willingness to continue to put your bodies on the line. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that. How would you, what you could tell us a little bit more about your kind of philosophy of nonviolent direct action, the thinking behind it, your assessment of its impact, and the reason why you continue to be committed to that.
Thanks, Jerry. That's a beautiful question. There's a couple long answers to that. Principally, we know when you study nuclear weapons, it's a lot of head work. You're in your head, you're imagining all these things, and nonviolent direct action is a way to put your beliefs into practice somehow. Secondly, and this was a lesson we learned from Gandhi's writing and his work was that the issues that we're trying to address in this case, we're just pointing out, nuclear weapons are hard to think about. People would rather not think about nuclear weapons. It's principally the last thing that anyone wants to think about. So to force this issue into the public arena, you have to do something dramatic. And Gandhi said that civil disobedience was forced onto them as campaigners because it was the only way to get press to pay attention to an issue. And that's our experience in the United States. Obviously, nuclear weapons are so unthinkable and so uncomfortable a subject that we had to get into the street and do dramatic actions just to bring the press out. And ultimately, as Dr. King pointed out, the nonviolent action strengthens the individual in their person and enables individuals, after gaining some experience, to continue on in this effort for the long haul. And so it's a study to be prepared to, as Gandhi said, accept blows without retaliation, and to take the case then through the judicial process as a continuation of the nonviolent action, to bring it again attention to the issue and to challenge the court's protection of these criminal acts. We've argued for decades that the courts, like they do in Germany now, by ignoring our appeals, they actually protect the nuclear infrastructure, the nuclear threat mongering, by their silence. And that's very deliberate. It's almost as if the nuclear weapons infrastructure is untouchable when it comes to the law. So that's another reason why we continue to walk into these places and force the courts to again consider the case that mere possession of these weapons is a violation of the law, just as any planned and prepared murder would be. And then ultimately, I think one thing we've learned over the years with nonviolent action is that we're not really sure going into a particular demonstration. You know, we always agree, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. And so we think we're prepared for a month in jail, or 2 months, or maybe a 6 months max, but we don't really know. So one thing about these actions is that we learn that we can handle the consequences, that they aren't as severe, at least for people in our particular situation who have so much support on the outside, that the jail experience is valuable for a teaching lesson and for strengthening our own commitments and our long-term ability to continue on for the long haul. Maybe Marion has a few things to say to this question too.
Yeah, I had to think about it first. Actually, what keeps me doing this work is, or what really amazed me was when I learned about, for example, Alfred Nobel, the founder of the Nobel Peace Prize. And he was that time making money with dynamite. That's what he was selling. But he was also saying that that's gonna be one day they're gonna be weapons. They are so big they can't be used. They can't be used for anybody to win, and that's the situation we are having definitely with nuclear weapons. And I think the peace movement did a great job in bringing over this knowledge about that, because for so long, everybody who has seen the Oppenheimer movie, I mean, how crazy scientists were after World War II to just risk using weapons they did not know whether they set the atmosphere on fire, and they all die, including themselves. So I'm hoping that we're gonna be the majority soon, hopefully, where people have learned that that there is no other way than nonviolence. There is no other way than we need to find ways to talk to each other everywhere in the world where oppression doesn't work anymore. And I think for me, that's why I'm also with a Fellowship of Reconciliation. We all somehow have to reconcile with everybody and everything, because we all part of this in one or the other way. It doesn't matter whether we have been in war, or we have to have produced it, or we had to pay tax because we had to, because we wanted to feed our children. And yeah, not to get divided, because as we know, this whole weapons is only, I mean, the military industrial complex, people, it's for the big corporations, it's for the 1% of the rich, how we say here. And yeah, I hope that even them and their children are realizing, if we don't solve this problems together, even for the rich, there is no place on this earth here anymore, and definitely not on Mars. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Dave Logston right now. Dave?
Yep, I just unmuted myself. Unmute myself. There we go. Hi,
Hi, Dave.
John. Nice to meet you finally, Marion. I hope you come back into the Minneapolis-St. Paul area and to visit John. And John, my point, I was thinking that one of the things that we've been doing with Women Against Military Madness and Invest for Peace, not as much as we'd like to have done, but informational picketing outside of the Oppenheimer movie. Now the thing about Oppenheimer, as I wrote a letter to the editor, the Star Tribune, was that yes, it's not a documentary, and obviously doesn't cover, you know, all the fallout, the implications, and it doesn't talk much about the victims of in Hiroshima, and they do stick to the narrative that it was something that was a necessary thing to do. But on the other hand, it opened up a lot of minds to thinking about the atom bomb and nuclear catastrophe, and it's an opportunity for peace groups to, when people are streaming out of this movie, to hand them. Well, I'd hand them a Nukewatch paper, but I don't have enough of those. I need more. But just informational. Make your own information stuff to flesh out some of the details that people so people understand that there was a lot of implications that still resonate today. So I think that's one idea. I'm just going to posit out there, and I know other chapters across the country are doing the same thing. We're not the originators of this action, but I think it is something that's it's a good thing to do.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. There's a couple other questions in the chat that I'd like to read out. One that came earlier, it says, please comment on the initial thoughts regarding artificial intelligence and nuclear warfare.
Well, let's call nuclear warfare artificial stupidity. I don't know enough about artificial intelligence to even make a comment on it, although it's quite obvious that the automation of launch on warning and launch control systems are very destabilizing and hair-raising, considering the alert status that Minuteman III missiles have been on in the Great Plains of the United States. And so for many decades, it's already been a rather frightening situation where the president has such a short period of time during which to find out whether a supposed attack on the United States is real or not. I'm sorry, I really haven't studied enough about artificial intelligence to make an educated comment about its effect on nuclear weapons.
Okay.
what I can say to it is that here in Germany, from Trier, we have a Professor Blesius is his name. And since more than 30 years, that's his topic, artificial intelligence and nuclear weapons. And we had him called as a witness in our trials many times. He was waiting in front of the courtroom to speak, but the judges never wanted to listen to him. From what he said, I mean, I'm not a computer freak and so on, but from what he said, it is very dangerous if artificial intelligence is going to be put into place. That's what they plan with nuclear weapons, and it's not controllable. I believe it's not controllable, but yeah.
Okay,
We will see.
thank you. That I guess you might drop that professor's name in the chat in case people want to look him up. But since you mentioned court cases, I'm just gonna, I know there's a few people with their hands raised, but let me ask you one more question that came in via the chat from John Kim. There's actually two questions. Did you try to reach out to the parliament to prohibit the stationing of US nukes in Germany? And then also in the court cases, did you raise the issue of Germany's violation of the NPT? And did any courts issue any ruling on this issue?
The German Bundestag or Parliament resolved in 2010. The issue was very hot and lively at that time. They resolved, I think it was unanimous, to urge the government, coalition government at the time, to negotiate the withdrawal of these weapons. And so that was a huge victory at the time, a result of hundreds of demonstrations bringing attention to these weapons, finally forcing the parliament to do something about it. But then, as Marion pointed out earlier, it was pushed back against by NATO, which laid real heavily on Angela Merkel at the time, who never followed through with it. And by the time of the NATO summit in Chicago in 2012, they had resolved to replace them with new bombs instead of removing them from Germany. The second question was about the NPT. Yeah, of course, in the court cases, we argue that both the United States and Germany are in a violation of Articles 1 and 2. Article 1 forbids transfer of nuclear weapons to another member state of the party, and Article 2 forbids the reception of nuclear weapons from another party. So in conjunction, they're both in violation and have been for decades of the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
You have anything to add to that one, Marion?
No.
Okay, let's go to Dan Shea in the queue.
Thank you both for being here. I just want to bring up again, when you were talking about how do we reach out to the youth. I do counter recruitment going into the high schools, talking with students, often invited by the teachers. That's a great way to get in there. And you'll be surprised at how damn intelligent these young people are in high school compared to what I was at that time. And they seem to be very well aware, because while I was talking about organizing for climate change, they had already organized, students themselves had already organized a huge movement. We have International Peace Day coming up on September 21st. There is a lot of action being happening. So I also work with some young activists as a coalition, which are a young man named Cody Urban with Resist US War and Imperialism, who's gone to Japan during the G7 summit and was appalled that that summit was being taken place in Hiroshima at the time that gathering NATO to come to and these military alliances in the Pacific. Which is scary because, like as everybody's already said, these weapons are being pointed at China. This is a real threat, whether it's Ukraine or China or North Korea or Taiwan, whatever proxy wars that they're planning. This organization is working with people internationally. They've been to Spain, they've been to Australia, they're working with Philippine activists. So there is movements out there. It's just bringing these people together. And these are youth. These are not people my age. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I've had my experience, but they come with respect for those of us who have been through this and have lived through these many challenges. We just need to welcome them into this and go to their thing. You want to get them involved, go to them. One thing I noticed that during this convention that I thought was really impressive is the music that was going on. If you want to reach youth, music and art are great ways to reach out to people. I know in the 60s, the Beatles and many of the organizations, many of the musicians really had an impact on revolutionary thought or resistance to the war. These kinds of things I think are really important. And when we saw somebody like Josh Shirley's daughter sing a IWW song, what better way if you start teaching kids music with those kinds of lyrics, they become very aware of what's going on. So I really, really appreciate that VFP has a music time during this convention. And I appreciate everybody that's been speaking out because I think it's so damn important. And I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We appreciate you too. Okay, moving on to Steve Morse.
Hi, John, you mentioned that you were jailed once for 7 weeks, and Marion, I don't know if you've gone to jail, but I had a couple of questions about that. One is, how prevalent is jailing in your actions, conditions in the German jail, and what your experience was like, and what other prisoners feel about, or you get the chance to talk to prisoners about why you're there and what they feel about it.
Yeah, it's not, it hasn't been a very prevalent practice. There are several people have been to jail for actions at Büchel. I'm not sure of the number. It's happened quite regularly over the last 25 years, but it's common in the court practice there to issue fines based on your income. They're called daily rates, and they work hard to get people to pay the penalty and avoid the jail time. In my case, it was a 900 euro fine. We would call it, it's called daily rates in Germany, based on your annual income. The conditions, obviously, as you might imagine, were superior to the conditions in jails and prisons in the United States, and I've had a lot of experience of them. The treatment by the guards there and the supervisory administrators is quite a night and day different, because we're treated as human beings, referred to by our names on a daily basis, Herr LaForge, and the conditions in this open prison that I was sent to, so-called open prison, were very civilized. It's for long-term sentenced prisoners who are at the end of a rather long sentence and are preparing to return to life on the street. So for the last 2 years of a otherwise long sentence, they can be at this Glassmore prison where I was for a few weeks. And so everyone's on good behavior. They do require you to work these light factory jobs in exchange for the privilege of having freedom on weekends to go home or visit family. You can, in this particular prison, go home 7 weekends out of a year. But since my sentence was a total of 7 weeks, I got to go home every weekend. So it was really bizarre in that way. was like special treatment, except that it was just coincidental that my sentence was that short. The food, just like in the United States, is not that great, but the conditions were much better.
Okay, I like to say some things too. We always, first of all, in Germany, you get a criminal record when you have 90 daily rates. But for trespassing and so-called property damage, when we cut the fence and go in, the first time you only get 30 daily rates. So you're well below. That's why they want you to pay money. And in the peace movement we share, normally we send out a call. If somebody doesn't want to pay it, then everybody pays a little bit, and then it's being done. But some people are thinking that they want to have a vigil behind barns, and they make it because they also want to make other people aware of oh, this topic is so important for me that I even go in prison for it. They just want to experience it. And it's, in a way, in this case, it's very privileged, because whenever somebody feels uncomfortable in prison, and you have, for example, 30 days to be in, you can call at home and say, oh, please pay me out. Just pay the last days which are left over, and then the next day you're going to be released. And even this is like really the soft way of prison, because these halfway prisons, and there are so many people who are waiting for it actually to get a prison place, because I think there are 6,000 people. They have fines they can't pay because of poverty reasons. They can't pay it, and they didn't pay for taking the bus or the train, and the government doesn't want to spend all this money. In our case, we were taken in because of they also want to break us a little bit. So, and take our frustration or whatever about these nukes. So and in case of, for example, last year there was Fritz from the Netherlands. He went to prison. Then there was a German woman from the Quakers, and John was the first US American in prison here. That's also something where we hope that the media picks up the issue, because they only pick up things they haven't been reported before. And then Dennis Duval, who was in prison as well. I mean, he's 81, and as a US veteran, that is mind-blowing already. That somebody who experienced this war and Vietnam War, that's also in the head of the German people here, that this was a war which was terrible, which was unjust, and so on. So there's no justification. So yeah, but anyway, for John, for sure, it was a total different experience as what he had in the United States so far. And no, I didn't go to prison because I just, didn't want to. I don't like the food, I don't like the cigarette smell and whatever.
Right. Thank you for your reflections about that. I think we're running out of time, but we have one more hand raised. And Doug, you want to go ahead?
Thank you. Thank you both, John and
Excuse me, I just want to say we can go until 40 past the hour, because we started a little late. We could even go, 42 past the hour, and then some of us have to get to the next one.
Okay.
Thank you, Ellen. So John and Marion, I want to thank you so much for your, informational output and also your ongoing commitment to this boots on the ground piece. So I have a question really for the whole group, since this is, and I mean, it may be an inappropriate question, but that's okay. I've asked inappropriate questions before. I live in Durham, North Carolina, and it's been very hot here lately. And following the Oppenheimer film and the Trinity film, we were thinking of getting a billboard up with we have a Getty image of the atomic explosion, and we're thinking of something like, you think it's hot this summer, just wait, and then showing the image and having an image of VFP. But we really haven't come up with a direct ask. You can't put too much on a billboard. You know, this is such an unapproachable topic, as you say. You know, it's unthinkable, and people don't want to look at this thing. But I think an image, you know, would certainly get their attention. But if anybody has any ideas of what a good ask would be, somebody's waving their hand. Alice, yes. I can put my email in the chat, and you can send me information if you'd like.
Well, I thought I'd just say it, that we're asking everybody in the United States to support Eleanor Holmes Norton windmill, warheads to windmills bill for abolition and putting the money into the climate. And that could be an ask. Support.
Yeah, that's too much on a billboard. Too
you
much
don't
on
have
a
to say a lot. Just support this from climate.
Too much for a billboard. I'll put my name in it. I'll put my email address, and if anybody has a hit, please send me an idea. We're struggling with what do we do for an ask. I know the image is powerful, and just saying you think it's hot now and then showing the explosion of a nuclear weapon, you know, is subconsciously enough, probably without asking anything, to end nuclear weapons. Okay, well, I will copy the chat, but let me just put in my email address, if I can type that, if I may. And I thank you all, everybody here on the call, and let us continue to stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, so that we can honor the 7 generations coming down the road who will have to deal with this nightmare. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. I think we BFP would be great to have some brainstorming sessions for billboard slogans, because I think that'd be a great way to reach the public with our messaging. Okay, we have another hand raised here, James Carpenter. Go ahead and ask your question or your.
Oh, hi, John. This is Jim from Milwaukee. The Golden Rule is coming to Milwaukee this weekend. I wonder if you're working to help build attendance at the press conference on Friday. And secondly, I want to know how this movement is interacting with the ceasefire and negotiation movement in Ukraine. Are you using the Golden Rule to promote the idea of we need a ceasefire and negotiation?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, for sure. We're going to help promote the attention to the press conference on Friday remotely. I was with the boat this weekend in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and we focused on the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons and the current violations of the NPT. But we didn't, in our public presentations, we didn't focus on Ukraine much at all, except with regard to the provocation that these nuclear weapons present to Russia. I'm not sure if the people with the boat generally on their tour addressed the Ukraine crisis. I'm not familiar enough.
One last person?
Yes,
Sure.
we do. We do actually often speak about the war in Ukraine because it's really hard to talk about nuclear weapons and the threat of nuclear war without acknowledging that we may be facing the biggest threat ever of nuclear war right now if that war continues to escalate. So we do share that with people. We compare it to the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. And we talk about the Veterans for Peace position before it gets totally out of control. And VFP is also part of the Peace in Ukraine Coalition, and we're going to a co-sponsor of the International Week of Action for Peace in Ukraine, September 30th to October 8th. So yes, James, thanks for the question, Jim, and it is part of ongoing messaging of the Golden Rule as well as of Veterans for Peace.
Jerry, I'm just wondering, maybe, because we do have to close this now, but Jerry, could you just say, since you didn't get to do your introduction because we couldn't find you, could you just say a word about the Veterans for Peace nuclear working group?
Sure. Well, the last few years, we have Veterans for Peace has definitely stepped up its work in terms of being a part of the worldwide movement for the abolition of nuclear weapons. And of course, the Golden Rule has been a big part of that. That's been a great vehicle for education and inspiring folks. But we also have a very active nuclear abolition working group. And we meet, like, for the last 2.5 years, we've been meeting twice a month, most months. One of those meetings is usually a special webinar with a particularly knowledgeable speaker. We might be inviting Marion and John to join us soon. We also put out our own, we've done a lot of internal education and actually we're bold enough to produce our own comprehensive Veterans for Peace nuclear posture review, which is available on the VFP website. So I would just say that if you appreciate the work that Veterans for Peace is doing for as part of the worldwide movement for nuclear abolition, and want to encourage us to continue the work, please consider donating. People have been very generous over this course of this convention in making donations to match Ralph Nader's $10,000 matching pledge. But you still, if you haven't done that yet, you still have a chance. Please consider making a donation, and you might want to make a remark in your donation that you want to see the work of the Golden Rule and the VFP nuclear abolition work continue and expand. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
And
Jerry.
I think we want to really thank our speakers for coming. And I'm very sorry, but we are going to have to close it here because we have to use the Zoom account to move to prep for the next session. So sorry about the tech difficulties, but I think we overcame it all, and your presentation was well worth the trouble. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Yes.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and Becky, you're going to have to end the meeting because I made you host.
Okay. Bye, everybody. See you.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you, John.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.